In preparation for the Unit 1 discussion, this PowerPoint provides an overview of the classic view of the Neolithic Revolution. You have already seen the significant impacts of the Neolithic Revolution, also known as the Agricultural Revolution, in both the textbook and in John Green's Crash Course Summary. Essentially, the Neolithic Revolution refers to the transition to agriculture and the domestication of animals. You'll remember John Green's fun jokes about the 99-cent double cheeseburger. You can also see in the background of this PowerPoint slide a depiction of the domesticated animals in ancient Egypt. These sorts of pictures, usually paintings and tombs, show that ancient Egyptians raised domesticated animals, including goats, cattle, sheep, and geese, by the 3rd millennium BCE. The Egyptians were not alone in their domestic pursuits. People living in at least 7 different sites around the globe began transitioning to agriculture about 12,000 years ago. The Egyptians benefited, borrowing agricultural technologies, domesticating animals, and adding their own innovations. I came across a National Geographic website that in some ways encapsulates the classic view of the Neolithic Revolution. It starts off with a bold subtitle introducing the Farming Revolution and reads, "Taking root around 12,000 years ago, agriculture triggered such a change in society and the way in which people lived that its development has been dubbed the Neolithic Revolution. Traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyles, followed by humans since their evolution, were swept aside in favor of permanent settlements and a reliable food supply. Out of agriculture, cities and civilizations grew, and because crops and animals could now be farmed to meet demand, the global population rocketed. Much of the classic thinking about the Neolithic Revolution was influenced by the work of Vere Gordon Childe, an archaeologist researching and publishing in the 1920s through the 1950s. In his early scholarly publications, Childe introduced the phrase, the Neolithic Revolution, and from him, experts latched onto the idea that the transition from hunting and gathering to farming and the domestication of animals was one of the most important developments in all of human history. Building on Childe's research, archaeologists in the early to mid 20th century assumed that the transition to agriculture was abrupt. They envisioned a swift adaptation of agriculture, portraying the Neolithic Revolution as a singular event that immediately reshaped the world. According to them, the Neolithic Revolution quickly paved the way for new sedentary lifestyles, a population boom, labor specialization, the differentiation of social classes, developments in art and religion, and the rise of civilizations. Overall, archaeologists of the classic view also assumed that farming was advantageous over hunting and gathering. They figured that farmers were more adaptable since they could store food and survive hardships. Scholars reasoned that agriculturalists and people who had domesticated animals took in more calories. And with their food supplies supporting larger populations, individuals and communities were comparatively stronger once they transitioned to agriculture. In essence, farmers won, and everyone with the capacity would choose to be a farmer. Over the past 40 years or so, a number of scholars have started to question these assumptions. They have tried to show that the transition to agriculture was not fast at all. In fact, some scholars no longer use the phrase Neolithic Revolution and instead prefer phrases such as Neolithic transition that emphasize that the shift was full of stops and starts and occurred over thousands of years. Similarly, scholars have questioned the assumption that farming automatically offered advances over hunting and gathering. As you will see in the readings posted in the discussion, they have shown that agriculturalists had to expend more energy to get food than hunter-gatherers. They have pursued a number of other avenues to suggest that farmers could have higher mortality rates or that some hunter-gatherers rejected farming because it did not benefit them. Other scholars have argued that some people continued to hunt even as they developed agriculture, or still others present evidence that there were settled communities before agriculture. Altogether, These revisionists have pushed for us to recognize a much more complex view of the Neolithic Revolution. Another source of controversy has been the origin and spread of the Neolithic Revolution. Current scholarship stresses multiple sites of innovation in terms of the development in agriculture and the domestication of animals. In this recent trend, scholars acknowledge that people in at least 7 different places around the globe developed agriculture and domesticated animals at each site. People used their own methods and ingenuity. Archaeologists have studied things like farming techniques to show differences between the regions. They argue that the Neolithic Revolution happened in a multitude of places. Scholarship from 50 years or more ago tended to recognize fewer sites and put more weight on the sharing of the knowledge of agriculture. They put more importance on the diffusion of agricultural knowledge and technology. The map above from 2010 shows 7 proposed sites for the origins of agriculture. You can note the sites in the Fertile Crescent, the Yangtze and Yellow River basins, the New Guinea Highlands, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central Mexico, Eastern North America, and Northern South America. There are other proposed sites not shown on the above map, and scholars also debate dates and where agriculture emerged first, second, and so on. As one last debate we will mention here, archaeologists have also disagreed about the reasons for the Neolithic Revolution. Early 20th century explanations put forward that the drastic climate changes, or another dramatic environmental shock, necessitated the Neolithic Revolution. In these explanations, climate or other change pushed people into new environments, seemingly more favorable for agriculture. Or in another scenario, people's situations were so dire that they were forced to come up with new solutions, agriculture, to meet their demands for food. There are also proponents of the population pressures argument. They suggest that as hunter-gatherer populations grew, people adapted by initiating more intensive gathering, selectively cultivating, and eventually farming. While there are a few other theories regarding the reasons for the Neolithic Revolution, one last theory, the feasting theory, rationalizes that agriculture developed out of the desire to show off wealth and power. For example, ambitious leaders held feasts to showcase their might and dominance. Their desire to hold feasts meant that the leaders had to acquire large surpluses of food, providing motivation for agricultural innovation. Some scholars will adopt a multi-causal approach, admitting that likely people developed agriculture for multiple reasons. Other scholars might passionately defend one of the above, or even an alternate theory. As you continue on to the Unit 1 discussion, make sure that you carefully follow the directions. Then, work through one or more of the sources listed in the discussion and explicitly explain how the sources you have chosen offers a different interpretation of the Neolithic Revolution. Then, make yourself a short list of the main characteristics of the classic view of the Neolithic Revolution. Then, decide whether you side with the classic view of the Neolithic Revolution or are you swayed by a more recent reinterpretation of the Neolithic Revolution. Finally, defend your position by explaining what drives your stance. Take one last look through to make sure you have met all of the content, length, and citation requirements. Submit and reply to 2 of your classmates.